Thanks for joining us for this episode of Strategic Storytelling.
Jesse and I work together to help people and businesses reach and connect with their communities.
Brian is a visual storyteller, designer, and chief creative officer at Pathfinder.
Jesse is very passionate about entrepreneurship. He's a very loyal person, and he is a very caring individual as well.
In marketing, the storytelling leans on the strategy, but the strategy needs storytelling to be effective.
Agreed. Welcome back to another Strategic Storytelling with Jesse and Brian, and we're going to continue our discussion on social media and kind of dive into a few more intricate things about the social media.
You're doing that like it's like a magic show.
It is kind of like a magic show. Some of it can feel very magical or very mystical because a lot of our clients do come to us with questions about like, how do I do this? How do we make this? How do we make this work? How are these other people doing it? And why am I doing these things and I'm failing? So let's get into that.
I always just lead off right away with telling them, you need to do the TikTok and you need to do the TikTok dance on the TikTok. And that is...
You want to show us the TikTok dance?
Marketing.
That's not going to be great for a podcast, but you want to do the TikTok dance? Let's get on the desk and you do the TikTok dance.
No one wants that.
That's for our marketing for this show.
We're doing such a great job today. But I think one of the biggest confusing things for people is like what social media platform to use. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about this in the last two episodes. But I think what we didn't really hit on a ton is just like moving from Facebook, Instagram to some of the other outliers that are well known but smaller and or more niche depending on audience.
Well, they all have their own. In Facebook or Instagram is owned by Facebook, but they all have their own kind of like
nuances,
special nuances that you have to kind of be aware of and play towards.
Oh yeah, like I think there's still a lot of people that believe that you can, create some content, a photo and some text and a link and whatever, and you can just drop that out on all platforms and you're good to go. And I would say that like there was a point in time when it was like, Facebook, not so much Instagram, but Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, where that is probably true. Mm-hmm. And that time is many years behind us now. It's not that you can't take a piece of content and kind of craft it for each one. It's just like if you take the exact same thing and you just drop it on each, it's just not going to go the way you think it's going to go.
Well, right. The social media, the Wild West of social media when it first started, it was just like, yeah, you could do that. You could just like, I got a lot of content, boom, put it out there and
post it on your wall.
Yeah. And not have really any rhyme or reason to it. But now it's like, well, everybody's putting out content. So it has to be very curated to your audience.
And I'd say that the algorithm works similarly, not exactly similarly on a couple of these platforms, but the content doesn't work as well on certain things versus others. So for instance, even like a really appealing photo that would garner tons of likes on Instagram, on LinkedIn wouldn't really be quite the same. Or on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it these days. So I think it's just something that people just don't really get. And like we have had clients for sure that, when we start with them, like they're like, well, why does it cost more to do multiple platforms or whatever? And we're like, well, this is not, it's similar. We might be using the same basic graphic or something like that. We have to size it differently.
Right.
On some platforms, we're using different text or different hashtags, or we're using sometimes different links altogether, even if it's getting to the same place. It's not like a full new piece of content on each platform, but it is additional work that is required. And certainly just, how you're playing to those different audiences too, sometimes can be very different. I'm trying to think of a good example. If I'm selling, McDonald's French fries, right? I could do a really nice photo of that and throw it on Instagram, Facebook, and do pretty well. If I throw that on LinkedIn and put no business tie-in, no professional related tie-in, like
Yeah, right.
it's just
Yeah.
going nowhere super fast. I think that's like people don't understand that. You do have to change it for those different audiences.
Right.
LinkedIn is probably the most similar in function to Facebook.
Okay.
It like as a whole, it kind of works similarly, but even just, and people don't understand this either, how we give access to pages and how those pages work is very different. The graphic image sizes are different. Just kind of the back end functionality of it is very different. And then the audience primarily is just night and day. I mean, you literally could be marketing to the same individual, and the way you market to them still has to change based on which platform you are on. Because if I'm on LinkedIn, it's a professional manner every single time. They've worked very hard at making sure that is retained. Even like fun poking memes on LinkedIn have a very different tone to them.
Oh yeah. Well,
It's
yeah. You're right. It's very business oriented and very professional, a professional feel to all of that.
yeah.
Because you know,
You're not sharing the same stuff like at all. Like on
no,
Facebook, it's wild, wild west. You could find everything of any kind, of any vulgarity or not.
Right.
You can find like faith stuff. You can find political stuff. You can just find anything. And you get to LinkedIn, and there's some things like that, or mostly really people's comments that are that. But like the base posts are always, the format is different. In
Mhm.
fact, an interesting thing that I see a lot is that the content on a LinkedIn post that is geared toward a sales effort is written the way you would write a Facebook ad, but not a Facebook post. But then on LinkedIn,
Okay.
it's like this is the ad content from Facebook, kind of, but it's written in that same basic language or format, and it's just how you use them is very different. It's
Right.
just very different.
Right.
LinkedIn ads are actually not as prevalent as Facebook, Instagram ads. Part of the reason is the ownership. Meta owns Facebook and Instagram, and they make all their money off of that, whereas
Mhm.
Meta owns those too. Microsoft owns LinkedIn, and so they don't necessarily need to make. They do make good money on it, but they don't make as much money, and they don't need to. And those ads work very differently. It's also a much smaller user base.
Right.
So I always tell people, like, even if LinkedIn isn't like the perfect platform for you, it's a really easy way to gain a better traction or reach quicker, because you're not fighting for as much airtime, so to speak.
That's true. When your message can be more focused,
Yeah,
because it's business audience. You're not gonna,
that
like
too.
you said, you're not gonna send bathroom jokes to people from your
I
LinkedIn
disagree.
page.
That's 100% of what I do on
I mean, unless
LinkedIn.
you're a plumber, maybe that
People think
works.
it's really weird, but that's I just have some fun with it. I don't know.
But so yeah, so it sounds like we're getting into LinkedIn first and foremost here. So is there any other things we should share that kind of, I don't want to say sets it apart, because they're all different. So
Yeah.
what is a client, what should a client be looking for when they're
Yeah. So
forming their LinkedIn marketing?
it's interesting. It's kind of like, I would describe it as the culture is very different.
That's a
And
good way to,
it's
yeah.
also the culture and how you interact with others is different.
Yes.
So for instance, if I'm selling something and I'm on Facebook, I am unlikely to message somebody that sales pitch, right?
Mm-hmm.
People do it, but it's not really like accepted behavior, so to speak. I think they've tried to make it that way, but it's not. You can message a business on Facebook, but if the business is messaging you, like, it's not really correct. But on LinkedIn, individuals message me every single day trying to peddle and sell something, whether it first appears that way or not. It's kind of funny. Some of the salespeople, the tricks that they try, and I do wonder if it like just works on a lot of other people and just not not me. Because I'm like, are you still doing this? Like, this is not, I can't, I don't know if you figured out yet, but after your 10th message, I am still not going to be responding to you, and you're about to get an unfollow. Because it's just, they'll message you like, hey, I thought we could connect on X topic. And I'm like, no, you didn't.
Oh,
You just want to sell me something, and you're going to use that as a reason to talk to me to then sell. And it's very disingenuous, which I think a lot of, when you put a lot of professional people, mostly salespeople, in one environment, I guess you just kind of you kind of start with like a disingenuous platform to begin with.
yeah.
But I also see like that's messaging though, and messaging works very different. You have to pay for some of that. Um, and also the way you follow people is very different too. Or it used to be more different, but it used to be like, um, you couldn't, you had to like be accepted professional. What's good Lord? You have to actually know each other. You can't just like
Yes.
friend anybody, follow
Right.
anybody, like you get
Right.
on Instagram, for instance. You have to like legitimately know this person. I remember my dad a couple different times. He'd be like, "Hey, this person, they asked to follow me on LinkedIn."
Right.
I'm like, "Okay." And he's like, "Well, I'm not sure if I should accept it." He's like, "But I saw that you are connected with them." And I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "So who are they?" I'm like, "I don't know." And
Like,
he's like,
I don't
"Well,
know all
you're
of them.
connected with them." And I'm like, "Well, okay. I clearly have a more liberal approach to this where I just I
Right.
connect with other people and you just don't." But it's a little bit more like that, where it's like on Facebook, it's like, or Instagram, especially, or Twitter, like just follow
Yeah.
whoever you're interested
So
in
and so
that
has
day.
followed you. And you're like, all right.
Yeah, that's fine,
Yeah.
whatever. Um, so like, I guess the feeling is that, I think too, though, that there's a lot of people I'll see that will, if they're not messaging a lot of people, but they're posting about like real life in a professional environment as a salesperson, as a marketer, as a business owner, whatever. It's just more accepted. It's
Yeah.
more like you see a lot more likes and comments on those things, whereas on Facebook it's not quite that way. That Facebook and Instagram, for instance, get a lot more comments and likes for things that are um, more personal in nature, and the businesses don't get necessarily as much, as depending on what it is or the following and whatnot. The interesting thing about LinkedIn that helps grow the network a little quicker and easier is that you see that, I feel like you see it more often on LinkedIn, where if someone liked a post, it will pop up in my feed, like Catherine will like something, and I will see Catherine liked this post about marketing,
Right.
and so you might too, or whatever. Whereas on Facebook, it's not as often or blatant. It's more like if your friend comments, you might see it, but
Yeah.
if they just like it, you won't.
Right.
So there's just some weird things, and it's not complete 100%. Like, certainly the algorithm has helped on Facebook. When a post is liked by your friends, you are more likely to see something. But on LinkedIn, it's like very like, here is the entire post in the feed
Mhm.
because your friend liked this. It's just a little different.
Yeah.
So that's probably the main. It's like a cultural difference almost more than it is a um, algorithmic difference.
Right.
How it functions is just a little
But
different.
something you brought up and you want to kind of carry across through all of your social media is, like you said, like you maybe feel like you're getting spammed by a lot of sales, and you're just like
And
you said,
recruiters.
and recruiters.
Ooh,
So that definitely means, like, try to be, you want to sell, but you don't want to like be so obvious that you're selling, like being like, so
we can do
being
a
your,
whole episode on that.
being yourself, being very transparent, being yourself, and like you said, showing like the everyday business, like when the things are good and when the things are bad. Like sometimes everybody has bad days, so showing those very real moments help people, like, oh well, this is a business that is a very human business. Just showing those kind of those just real things throughout is just a great idea. Is there anything else we want to get into with LinkedIn and what we
No,
should...
I would just also add it to the pool of, we talked about this on one of the other episodes where it used to be a customer has to see you 7 times before they buy or trust you.
Mhm.
That over the years has increased to like 70s. It's just a huge, bigger and bigger number every year. And so I think people write off LinkedIn a lot, especially if you're like a consumer based business. I guess I would say, is it the first thing you do? Of course not. So especially if you're selling like consumer products, but try to, as you're trying to grow your business, maybe just think about like, okay, if I have a consumer based product, great, but like, how can I make that appeal to this platform and this audience in a way that's a little more authentic and make use of it?
Mhm.
Because it is certainly easier to gain a following in some ways on LinkedIn, just because it is a smaller pool of people you're trying to get their attention. So it's just, if you can make it valuable, it really can be really beneficial for people.
Now, would I guess what kind of business do you think that would be most useful, or LinkedIn would be most useful to a business? Like, is
Business
there,
to business services
I think
and
that's
products is
that's
number
pretty,
one.
I'd say that's a slam dunk right there.
Yeah,
That's kind of
if
easy.
if you are business to business in any way, it's pretty much you should be on there.
Right.
Like
what
if
if
you're
I'm
primarily business consumer, like I said, just figure out how to make that more business to business. So, it can look disingenuous, I guess, but if you're a restaurant
I was say, what
and
if
you're
I'm a
mostly business
restaurant?
consumer, right? But maybe you have a nice back room where meetings could be held, and you could cater them
Mhm.
within your own store. Or maybe you do catering for businesses. Maybe that's a big part of your restaurant business. Like those are things that appeal to these types of people, and there are not a whole lot of restaurants on there, and so you might actually get some traction by doing that in an appropriate manner.
Mhm.
Now, restaurants are very hyper local. So you have to, it's an even more niche pool within that. Like you can't like be connecting with business people, states away,
Right.
for that particular example. But, I do think there are ways to do it they're still real people. They are still consumers, you just have to kind of tailor it to the mindset they have when they're on that platform. And you might be able to get some traction there too.
Okay. What's the next platform we want to get
Let's do
into?
Twitter.
Twitter?
X.
Twitter X?
Twitter X. Which won't be a terribly long conversation.
I'm going to be honest. I'm going to lean heavily on you on this one because I've never really been into Twitter, and now
Yeah.
I'm even less interested in X. So
Most people, yeah.
like what? Like,
Well, here, let me start with the. Oh man, the sound effects today. Let me start with the very. Let's start with the positives.
Sure.
Twitter historically was always better for larger populated areas. So cities.
Yeah.
Certainly with like our more local, smaller town clients that we have worked with. That is not where we're starting in most cases.
I do always remember them, especially when we first started out. Like, oh, should I be on Twitter? And it's like, oh, you really shouldn't. They're like,
there's some niche things that worked
Yeah.
okay, but like it's just not for that.
Yeah.
It never took off in
was
that
more,
way,
more
or maybe it
mass.
did originally, and then it just kind of became something different. But yeah, if you're in the city, I still think there's some value there. Or when it was still Twitter, there was absolutely value there. More recently, and I don't want to get into this a ton because it's just not worth it. But when it became X, and all the things between there, and how that happened, certainly there was some big changes. I don't think we're done seeing big changes with X. I think that Elon Musk's vision for it is something that is very different than what Twitter was to begin with, or has been. I think there could be a place for it, but it's going to be such a different thing that I don't think we know what that is. I think just depending on how things go, that vision could also just it could change over time.
Well, what is that vision for people that don't know?
I think, I don't know Elon personally.
We're right.
But from what I've read about, it seems to me that he has a vision to create an app similar to what they have in China, forget what it's called, WeChat, I believe. And in
Oh, yeah, you
China,
told
the
me about
WeChat
this, yeah.
app is like this. It's like this all-encompassing app where you go on here, and it's like a social platform and a place for messaging, and it's a place where you can order food and a place where you could maybe buy products. And there's a you could order something similar to like an Uber.
Oh, wow.
And
So it's like merging all the apps.
it's kind of merge it. Yeah. I mean, I've never used it obviously, but
Yeah.
it's just a much more, it's a conglomerate.
Okay.
And, I've talked to people about this. I'm like, hey, if you could, I can kind of see the value of that, because like sometimes I'm on my phone, I'm like, good Lord, there's too many apps. I don't want to jump around anymore. Like, there's just too many.
Yeah.
And so I can see the value of it. I can also see the detriment of it. You're doing too much in one place, and there's a lot of user friendliness issues. There's some privacy issues. There's some one company owns all issues, which is kind of like, how China is generally known.
Mhm.
So, to me, I've kind of said to people when they've asked about it that my opinion, with not tons of knowledge, but my opinion of X and his vision for that is, this is going to go very, very well because America doesn't have anything like this, or it's going to go very, very poorly because America doesn't want anything like this, or because they don't like Elon. I don't know.
Right.
But either way, I don't think it's going to be in the middle forever. I think it's going to be like, this is going to become this big thing over time, or it's going to just totally flop.
Fade away. Yeah.
Either way, what we tell our clients right now, for the most part, is this is not the platform to be on. And it's nothing against X or Twitter. It's just that there is so much uncertainty that it is, and it's hard enough to operate on constantly changing social media platforms. And with an added bucket of uncertainty on X, it's not necessarily worth the investment, especially for small business. If you're Microsoft and Apple and McDonald's and whatever, I have a very different opinion about that. But for the people that we're dealing with, like, it's probably just not the place to be investing your time, especially if you're not on there currently.
Yeah.
And that's about all I have to say about that for now.
Yeah. Until something else comes up.
Yeah. Which, could be like a week from now. We'll see.
And yeah. Who's next?
Who is next?
Yeah.
Let's save the most fun conversation for last. Let's first do Pinterest.
Oh, yeah.
Pinterest is the forgotten lost stepchild.
I forgot about it until you just mentioned it.
Well, so Pinterest is really great, actually, because it's super niche, right?
It really is, yeah.
The audience is niche. The companies that are on there is, niche is probably the wrong word, but just limited.
Yeah.
I feel similarly about it as I do to LinkedIn. If you can figure out a way to use that in a valuable manner, you are probably going to hit a lot more eyeballs of a certain type of person way easier than you might on other platforms. So, if you're like us trying to promote design, for instance, Pinterest might be a really great place for you. I think more so, though, if you're selling creative products, like if you're an Etsy seller, you sell some special product on Etsy, Pinterest is probably a big one for you. Again, you're going to hit so many more people.
How should clients be using Pinterest then?
Well, so we don't use it a lot for our clients because, for instance, pick somebody out of the pool here. So if we work like an accounting firm, right? Yeah. Oh, what can we possibly put on? I don't, you'd have a nice little creative challenge for yourself to really, do a whole lot there. I do see some companies, they'll just like put their blog posts with whatever photo comes along with it on there for whatever reason. If you got somebody that's just doing it, it never hurts, I guess.
Sure.
But you're not going to see a lot of traction. But if you're making something creative of any sort, like you're a photographer, you're a creator, I don't know. Like
if you have a product, like something physical, right?
So on Pinterest, you can do just like any other platform. You can link to your product page, right?
Yeah.
Or you can do paid ads for things. You can, there's lots of different ways to kind of do that. But it's just, like I said, it's more niche in that even the searchability, like people are, sometimes more than even like Facebook, I would say, people are searching for something specific on Pinterest. So like I might, be interested in, Here's a good one. I see a lot of women do Pinterest, or in the past have done Pinterest for planning their wedding.
Sure.
And they have like a little board and they pin stuff to it. The posts basically for here's what I want it to kind of feel like and look like, and here's the kind of decor I want and the kind of cake I want, and so on and so forth. And it's hard because I think a lot of those people do end up going to like a local business that they may know, and they're saying, hey, I found this on Pinterest. This is what I want you to do for me.
Right.
And, it makes sense. Like cakes, how are you possibly going to ship that across the country? That would be a nightmare.
Exactly.
But for certain kinds of products, if you're doing like table placements or centerpieces or stuff like that, like you can buy that from anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So if you make these and you sell them on Etsy or something like that, and people start pinning that, you're likely to get sales out of that. So I think it's probably the most. I don't want to put my foot in my mouth. I'm trying to think real quick. I think it's the most niche social media platform there is.
Okay.
Or at least the most well-known niche social media site.
Okay.
Or maybe Threads. Just kidding. I'm not touching that one. Is it even a thing anymore after the 2 months of success? I can't with your sound effects today. So Pinterest is just like this it's like social media, but not sort of. It works a little bit more like an ideation creation board than it does a social media platform.
Yeah.
Which sometimes, hurts things that are on there in terms of sales and business growth. But again, there's so few using them that, if you can create a good following on there, you really could create something more interesting.
Yeah.
At least start getting more visitors to your website or your store or things like that.
Yeah. And how does, maybe you know this or maybe you don't. How does Pinterest like kind of aggregate that? How do they like, because as far as I understand, Pinterest is like you said, it's connected to the websites. It's connected to,
yeah. I mean, they do try to keep you within the platform. Like if you open up a pin,
it opens it up.
It then has like a feed of like, here are similar things that you might like. And, the more you pin to your board, the worse it gets. You might just see just pretty much all that. But, I feel like it's more of a search engine than.
It's like a visual search engine almost.
Yeah. It's like, people use the search bar, I think, on Pinterest for ideas or thoughts or specific or examples more than they would use like a Facebook for that.
Mm-hmm.
On Facebook, you might be searching for a company or a person. But on Pinterest, you're searching for like, I want to see cakes that are orange, or I want to see, designs about this, about a restaurant, like, or stuff like that. So yeah, it's kind of a weird little niche place.
Yeah.
I keep using the word niche, but it really just is. It's just, so you could go Google that stuff too, and you're going to get similar kinds of things. I think it's just the way it's displayed, and, it's in an app format more than anything else. And, Google searching versus a Pinterest app is a very different experience. And so I think that's kind of how they've won their audience.
Yeah, you're right. I think it's the way it's displayed and the way that everything else kind of, kind of, what is that? Ripples out from your search, basically. Like you're like, oh, this didn't really find what I want. Oh, but I like this. So it helps you kind of like rabbit trail, if you will, or even just find something that you maybe wouldn't have looked for before.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because like the same kind of words you would search on Google versus Pinterest do sort of come up with different results.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not every time, but a lot of the time it does.
Yeah.
I think part of that too is just like if I upload a design, for instance, that I did on Pinterest, there's a lot less designs on Pinterest, whereas Google is going to find everything, including things that are on Pinterest. And so again, if you are starting out and you're not this huge company, like getting that SEO for that image up on Google search is much more challenging than it would be on a Pinterest. It's a much smaller thing.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
So Snapchat's probably not even worth discussing because it has evolved from sort of social media platform to a little bit more of just communication platform. There are ads on there, but for our listeners or our clients, I would say you better be a giant company for this to be anything that you even start looking at.
Utilize. Yeah.
It's just a different thing.
Yeah.
And then we get to our newest favorite, TikTok. It's fake clapping.
Jake the engineer loves his TikToks.
All right, so let's just preface all this with like TikTok has been run through the ringer. It became this giant thing during COVID is really when it took off. It was primarily music, dancing, or rather video to align with music.
And funny skits, funny.
And then it started to go to funny things and now it's Reels.
Yeah, it's Reels.
It was the first Reels.
It was the first Reels, yes.
But it's also gone through like all these legal problems because the parent company of TikTok is a China-based company, and I wouldn't pretend to know all the details about all of why this is going on, but it basically comes down to this company is untrusted by the United States, if not many other countries. And there is a lot of belief that there is an algorithmic thing within TikTok that is monitoring people in lots of different kinds of ways. I myself have actually dug into this a little bit. And yes, if you have TikTok on your phone, you, at least in the past, could find some additional files in the storage of your phone that should not be there.
Oh.
And so I couldn't tell you what they were for specifically or how they work or why they were there, but it's been enough to create, lots of different federal level issues around this app.
Okay. And we're at the point where the United States has made it illegal, right? Or they're saying that they...
Yeah, so this went through when Trump was in the White House, this went through one battle, which kind of passed. I don't even know if it ended. It just
got kind of pushed to the side.
It was either quiet. Yeah. It was just quiet. It's getting pretty serious. The president has said that if it gets to his desk, he will sign that it is illegal or banned or whatever. I think it did pass either Senate. It passed one of the judicial branches. Branches of government, and I think it's on review with the other, and then it would go to the president's desk. In which case, he's already said that he would sign it, meaning that it may be no more before too long. The other option, though, is that, if the parent company sells it to a United States-based company or person, that would be a way around it. Now, Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank is the main person I've seen that said that they would be interested in buying it. But he's also said it would not come with the whole package. They would actually not give the algorithm with it. It would just be the brand and audience. So they would have to rebuild the algorithm for TikTok, which is a big part of it.
Yeah. It's
it's
probably the biggest.
He's said it's worth quite a pretty penny, just not as much as it would be if they gave that.
Right.
My own opinion is that if they are that hard set on not selling the algorithm with it, that probably tells you something about the legality of whatever they are doing.
It seems a little suspect.
It's just a little bit. But in the meantime, let's just go through it.
Sure.
I would tell you that as from a technical functionality standpoint, probably know the least about this one, mostly because I took it off my phone some time ago. However, from a user standpoint, we've had this question a lot with businesses. They always ask us like, should we be doing TikTok? Like, it just seems like everyone's on TikTok, whatever. And to them, I say, this is not what you think. Right. First of all, their business platform is very young and untested comparatively to, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, so on and so forth. That's just based on, time and investment. but secondarily, like you have to really think about the audience that's on there.
Yeah.
Though I think there is a wide net of age groups on there, it is primarily younger. Meaning, if you are selling a business-to-business service, or you're selling cars, or you're selling refrigerators, or you're selling real estate, or whatever, this is probably not your audience.
No.
They might be someday, but if we're just talking about general investment in marketing, this is not
because
where you start.
They don't have the financial stability.
Yeah, it's just
to
not.
be buying those things.
and by the time they might, TikTok might not be a thing. So we'll
Right.
see. So I always kind of turn people away from that. There are some companies that make more sense. So if I'm we do have one client who services families, younger kids, services for kids. And they do have TikTok. We did put that on their website for them. Is it like really doing a lot for the organization? I wouldn't say that it is. But they are saying, much of our base is this age group, and that's why we're doing it. Fine.
Well, and also, like, if saying that it's that the base is their age group, and that age group doesn't have the funds to do it, but their parents do. So, I mean, that's something to bring them in,
Yeah.
But,
Well, and then additionally, like, I think I think a lot of businesses do struggle to understand the economics of these different platforms, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm on Facebook and add Reels, which is something that we provide for a lot of clients, that is a way easier jump. And a way different and larger audience that they probably want to hit anyway.
Right.
If we have to go to a brand new platform where the audience is much more limited, and it might not even be the audience they primarily need to reach, us spending that time and money on that just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Right.
If you're going to do it, your marketing internally, it still does not make a lot of sense. I've seen some companies, they'll make TikTok videos. They'll put them as a reel on Facebook, Instagram, and they'll put them as a TikTok. And that if you want to do that, it's fine, I guess. But it's really, I feel like TikTok works a lot better with influencers who are selling very niche consumer products, and that's becoming a bigger part of the marketing world. And it's constantly changing, though. Not 2 years ago, you had to have an influencer that you were paying the big bucks to, whose name is well known to make it make sense at all. Whereas in just the past, I don't know, 2 years, something like that.
Right.
You could build a network of influencers who only have a small following, but are your direct target audience, and that might make some sense. So it's that constant change, I think. And in marketing, like, we do tell our clients all the time, like, we have to, what we do for you this year may not be what we want to do next year, just depending on how that market changes. I think us, more than many other industries, it's constant change.
Keeping up with the trends, and the trends, and the apps are constantly changing, and the algorithms within those are constantly changing. And not just that, it's the size of the photo or video, the type of photo or video, the content you're writing in there, the hashtags you're using, like all of those things.
Well, and we're going to have to deal with it at some level. However, I think it's important to have a real conversation about that. It's not that we're avoiding pivoting with those changes and trends or platforms. It's that if you have a limited budget, which most clients of ours do, right? Let's do some tried and true things, because right now you're not doing anything, or you're not doing much of value. And so that's always where we're going to start. Now, if you are a high growth company and you've got the money to spend, great. Let's talk about how we, align with some trends on TikTok, because that makes sense for your audience.
Right.
Great. That is not the majority of companies. Most companies are small business, which, is under, the government defines it as under 500 employees, but we mostly define that as much smaller than that even. And, that's just not where you should be putting your time.
TikTok should not be your first choice.
And if your budget expands rapidly, I still am not starting with TikTok. I'm like, we should do more of some of these other things, like more video, or do a podcast, or do a bigger website presence, or paid ads. It's just on the hierarchy of value for, again, not all, but most companies. It's just not where your dollars should be going.
Mm.
It does not apply to all, just
Yeah.
97%. So if you hear me and you're like, no, we found a lot of value out of this, well, okay, you might be in the very small minority, but
Exactly.
yeah. So there's
Well, we talked about LinkedIn. We talked about
Twitter
X. We talked about Pinterest, and we talked about TikTok. And yeah, I mean, I think we save the rest of them for another podcast, because there's a lot of
that's pretty much all the main platforms, I think, that we should be covering.
Yeah.
There, once in a while, there might be some new thing that we could talk about. Threads would be a fun one to just touch on for a few minutes.
Well, I think we could get into Facebook and Instagram.
But yeah, getting into the details and some of the very specific parts of those social media platforms, I think, is something that we didn't hit, and we can in the future.
We'll definitely do that in maybe the next episode. Definitely in the future for sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's another episode of Strategic Storytelling with Brian and Jesse. Thanks for listening, and we hope you will enjoy the next show. Thanks for listening to Strategic Storytelling, a Pathfinder podcast. Be sure to subscribe and follow our socials. For more information, visit our website, yourpathfinder.io.